Yeah, and I don't know. I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but I don't know if I agree that we're in the golden age of women's
Okay.
wrestling, because on the one hand, do I feel like we've come a very long way from the Brian
Mhm,
Benton matches? Yes, absolutely.
mhm,
And do I feel like maybe in terms of the pool of the talent that's out there, we're in the
mhm.
golden age? Yes, absolutely, 100%. And especially like the media recognizes that too. This year we saw Pro Wrestling Illustrated, instead of doing a women's top 150, now it's top 250,
Mhm.
because there's just a lot of women who are doing great, who are killing it on the scene. And like you said, in terms of talent currently, absolutely on par with the men, 100%. Like I couldn't like there's no loss of quality when it comes to women's
Mhm.
wrestling at all. But uh, there's always a but. Um,
But
Unfortunately for the big companies, unfortunately for the big
yeah,
leagues, the women's matches are still the popcorn match, and it's a very mild and nice way to put it. The popcorn match, I say the pee break match,
I
because like one thing that I do as a woman and as someone who advocates for women's wrestling, whatever show it is, whatever promotion it is, I make a point to never leave during the women's match, because a lot of people will. Because
yeah.
well, if I can pick another one to get popcorn during, I will do it. So I try to stay in the building during the women's match. But one thing that I've noticed that the big companies do, and we're not going to name drop, but we both know what companies I'm referring to.
Mhm.
Uh, a
There's
lot of
an
the time,
elite
they would
one and
do
there's a wrestling
not
entertainment
only
one.
is the Yeah, there's the entertaining one. That's mostly the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, uh, a lot of the time, not only will the women's match on the card, and I say the women's match on the card because mostly it's
Yeah.
one women's match on the card. So most of the time, not only will the women's match on the card be the one that's had the least build and the one where the stakes are the lowest. So how can you blame a fan for leaving the room for that match in particular? But one thing I've noticed that I really hate is that a lot of the time those bigger promotions would put the women's match in the P break spot in the card.
Yes.
They will put it after a title match, they will put it after a very intense long match. Like you can't treat women's matches like that, give them the least build, give them the least time, give them the least importance, and put them in the P break spot in the card, and then be like, well, look at that. People don't want to watch it. People are leaving. It doesn't work like that. You can't turn it on the fans. It is not the fans' fault. There's always, in building something and in promoting something that might be less popular, there's always sacrifice. You always have to maybe cut a men's match. You maybe cut it a little shorter, or maybe be prepared that the ratings will drop a little bit when you start building the women's storylines, but then they'll go back up because they will gain more importance. Like it's always something that has to be done in terms of like you can't just go like this and everything brings you money. When you try
Mhm.
to build a marginalized talent, you have to put certain sacrifice in it. And another thing is like the percentage of women's matches. Like I said, it's still
Mhm.
very much so. For not even just for the larger promotions, for most promotions, it will be one women's match on the show. And also, as much as I advocate for intergender wrestling, I absolutely love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Sometimes the promoters will even put an intergender match on the card and treat it as a reason to ditch a fully women's match. That's another thing
Yes.
that happens. But even with that, like I've also like as a journalist, I've been to press conferences and including those larger companies, and I've asked this question, and this question gets evaded most of the time. I ask in pretty simple terms, like, um, are we, can we expect a fairer percentage of matches on the show when it comes to women's matches versus men's matches? And the answer that I'm usually given is, well, yeah, we're trying to build women's storylines. We're putting it as main events when it makes sense. And it has to make sense and there has to be a story. Well, whose job it is? It's their job to make it make
Absolutely.
sense.
Always remember, you are not alone. Catch full episodes every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.